You don't deserve to call yourself our son." My father's words cut through the evening air of our family home. The same home I'd just saved from foreclosure 2 weeks ago. I stood there, stunned, as my mother sat silently at the kitchen table, refusing to meet my eyes. My name is Marcus Turner, 32 years old, and until this moment, I'd believed that family meant supporting each other unconditionally. I'd spent the last 10 years building my software consulting business, living modestly despite my success, always ready to help when my family needed it, and they had needed it, more times than I could count. "I'm a disappointment?" I asked quietly, my hand still gripping the folder containing the latest bank statements. "After I just paid off your debt." Dad's face reddened. "We didn't ask for your charity, and now you're throwing it in our faces, acting like you're better than us just because you have some money?" I looked down at the folder, remembering the day 2 weeks ago when I'd walked into Meridian Bank and paid off their $90,000 debt, credit cards, personal loans, and the second mortgage they'd taken out, all of it cleared. I'd done it quietly, without fanfare, wanting only to give them a fresh start. "That's not what this is about," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm worried about you, the gambling, the credit cards. It's a cycle that needs to stop." "How dare you?" Dad slammed his fist on the table. "I don't need financial advice from my own son. Your sister never questions our choices. She understands respect." Ah yes, my sister Amanda, the golden child who could do no wrong, despite living off our parents' dwindling resources at 35. The same sister who had called me in a panic 3 months ago, begging me to help save our childhood home from foreclosure. "Amanda doesn't question you because she benefits from your poor decisions," I said, finally letting some anger seep into my voice. "She's been living rent-free here for 5 years, watching you spiral into debt." Mom finally spoke, her voice thin and defensive. "Your sister is going through a difficult time. She needs our support." "And who's supporting you?" I countered. "Who's making sure you don't lose everything?" Dad stepped closer, his face inches from mine. "Get out. Get out of this house and don't come back until you learn some respect." I looked at him, really looked at him, the father who had once taught me about integrity and hard work, now consumed by pride and denial. Something inside me shifted, a final thread of hope snapping clean. "Okay," I said simply, turning toward the door. "I'll go, but remember this moment. Remember that I tried to help." "We don't need your help," Dad shouted after me. "We never needed it." As I walked to my car, I could hear Amanda's voice inside, already comforting our parents, probably spinning this into another story about her ungrateful brother. I sat in the driver's seat, my hands shaking slightly as I pulled out my phone. The email I'd received that morning was still open, notice of default, second notice. Despite my paying off their previous debts, my parents had already taken out another loan, falling right back into their old patterns, but this time, they'd borrowed against the house itself. I hadn't told them I'd been monitoring their financial situation, hadn't mentioned that I'd set up alerts for any new loans or credit applications in their names. They'd managed to rack up another $45,000 in debt in just 2 weeks, a feat that would have been impressive if it wasn't so tragic. I started my car, but instead of heading home, I drove to my office downtown. It was time to make some calls and put a plan into motion. My parents had made their choice, refusing my help while simultaneously destroying their future. Fine, if they wanted to learn the hard way, I would let them, but I wouldn't let their pride destroy our family home, even if they never knew what I was about to do. I spent the next 3 hours in my office, making calls to financial institutions and my business attorney. By midnight, I had everything arranged, a new LLC created under a different name, funding transferred, and instructions given. When the foreclosure notice inevitably came, and it would come soon given their spending habits, I would be ready. They wanted to reject my help, that was their choice, but they had no idea who would be showing up at that auction. As I finally drove home that night, I thought about the family photos still hanging in their house, 25 years of memories, of birthdays and Christmases, all at risk because of pride and poor choices. Well, those memories would be safe, even if my parents never knew who really saved them. 2 months. That's how long it took for everything to unravel. I watched from a distance as my parents missed payment after payment, as the bank notices piled up, as Amanda continued to enable their behavior while crying poor herself. I received regular updates from my attorney about the foreclosure process. Each time my parents took out a new credit card or payday loan, I knew about it. The total now exceeded $120,000, more than they could hope to pay back on Dad's postal worker pension and Mom's part-time bookkeeping job. They didn't try to contact me during those 2 months. No calls, no texts, not even when they received the final foreclosure notice. Pride, it seemed, was more important than salvation. The auction was scheduled for a Tuesday morning at the county courthouse. I arrived early, dressed in a plain black suit, just another bidder among the dozen or so people gathered in the austere room. I sat in the back, hat low over my eyes, waiting. At 9:45 a.m., my parents walked in with Amanda. They looked smaller somehow, defeated. Mom was crying quietly while Dad stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched. Amanda kept patting their hands, probably promising she'd find a way to help, the same empty promises she'd been making for years. They didn't notice me, why would they? Their son was just a disappointment, remember? The auctioneer began his spiel, describing the property, outlining the terms. When the bidding started, I waited. Let others make their initial offers. $150,000, $175,000, $200,000. Finally, when the bidding seemed to be winding down at $225,000, I stood up. $300,000, I said clearly, my voice carrying through the room. My parents turned at the sound of my voice, their eyes widening in shock. Amanda's mouth fell open as she recognized me. $300,000 going once, the auctioneer called. Dad started to say something, but no words came out. $300,000 going twice. Mom's hand flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Sold, to the gentleman in the back. I walked to the front of the room, passing my stunned family without a glance. As I signed the paperwork and handed over the cashier's check, I could feel their eyes on me, could hear Amanda's whispered, "Oh my God." They were about to learn that sometimes the biggest disappointments come with the most expensive lessons. The silence in the courthouse hallway was deafening. I stood by the water fountain, reviewing the final paperwork with my attorney, Sarah, when I heard their footsteps approaching. Marcus, my father's voice, smaller now, without its usual thunder. Son. I turned slowly, facing my family for the first time since the auction. Dad looked aged, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. Mom clutched her purse like a shield. Amanda hovered behind them, her expression a mix of calculation and fear. "What are you going to do?" Mom asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Where will we go?" I studied them carefully, remembering all the times they dismissed my concerns, rejected my help, chosen pride over practical solutions. "You have 30 days to vacate the property," I said, keeping my voice professionally neutral. "Standard procedure." 30 days? Amanda stepped forward, her designer purse swinging on her arm, probably another gift from our parents' credit cards. "You can't do this to them. They're your parents." Interesting. I turned to face her directly. Where was this concern when they were drowning in debt? When they were taking out payday loans to cover your car payments? Sarah cleared her throat softly, reminding me to stay calm. We'd prepared for this confrontation. "Marcus," Dad started, his face flushing. "If this is about what I said, this isn't about what you said." I interrupted. "This is about what you did, and what you'll keep doing if nothing changes." I pulled a folder from my briefcase and handed it to them. "This is every loan, credit card, and financial obligation you've taken on in the past 5 years, the gambling debts, the cash advances, the home equity loans, all of it." Mom's hands trembled as she opened the folder. "How did you?" "I've been tracking it all," I explained. "Every time you opened a new credit card, every time you borrowed against the house, even after I paid off the first round of debts, you went right back to the same patterns." "That's none of your business," Amanda snapped. "You had no right to spy on them. Someone had to pay attention." I shot back. "Someone had to care enough to watch them destroy themselves." Dad leafed through the papers, his face growing paler with each page. The total amount was highlighted at the bottom, $237,000 in various debts, not including the house. "I don't understand," he muttered. "It can't be this much." "But it is," I said quietly, and it would have kept growing. The gambling, the loans to cover the gambling, the new credit cards to pay off the loans. A perfect spiral that would have ended with you losing everything anyway. "So your solution is to make them homeless?" Amanda's voice rose sharply. "To humiliate them?" I turned to Sarah and nodded. She pulled out another folder. "This is my proposal," I said, handing it to my father. "A lease agreement. You can stay in the house. We don't need your charity," Dad started to say, but Mom grabbed his arm. "Robert, please, just listen," I continued as if he hadn't spoken. "You can stay in the house under certain conditions. First, all existing credit cards are cancelled, every single one. Second, you agree to financial counseling and gambling addiction treatment." "I don't have a gambling problem," Dad protested weakly. I pulled out my phone and opened a document. "Last Tuesday, you spent 6 hours at Golden Gates Casino. Thursday, 4 hours. Saturday, from 2 p.m. until midnight. Would you like me to continue? The color drained from his face. Mom's grip on his arm tightened. Third condition. I pressed on. Amanda moves out, gets her own place, pays her own bills. What? Amanda shrieked. You can't. I can and I will. This enabling stops now. All of it. Sarah stepped forward, her professional demeanor a stark contrast to the family drama unfolding. The lease agreement is month to month. Any violation of these conditions results in immediate termination. The rent is set at market rate, but with a significant portion held in escrow. If all conditions are met for 12 consecutive months, that money will be returned as a savings fund. I watched as the reality of their situation sank in. They had no choice, no other options. The house they'd lived in for 30 years now belonged to me, and these were my terms. How dare you? Amanda's voice shook with rage. After everything they've done for you, everything they've done for me? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You mean like maxing out credit cards to pay for your failed business ventures? Or remortgaging their house to cover your temporary financial setbacks? I turned back to our parents. You have 24 hours to decide. Either accept these terms or start packing. Your choice. As I walked away, Mom called after me. Marcus, please, we're still your family. I stopped but didn't turn around. Family doesn't watch silently while their loved ones self-destruct. Family doesn't enable addiction and financial suicide. Family tells the hard truths, even when it hurts. The next 24 hours were the longest of my life. I sat in my home office, staring at my phone, wondering if I'd pushed too hard. Maybe Amanda was right. Maybe this was too cruel. But then I remembered the folders full of debt documentation, the countless nights I'd laid awake worrying about them losing everything, the way they'd thrown my help back in my face, choosing denial over recovery. At exactly 3:45 p.m. the next day, my phone rang. It was Mom. We'll do it, she said quietly. All of it. The counseling, the credit cards, everything. She paused. Your father. He's agreed too. He's scared. Marcus, we both are. Good, I replied, relief washing over me. Being scared means you understand what's at stake. Amanda's furious, she added. Says she'll never forgive you for this. Amanda needs to grow up and stand on her own feet. She's 35. Mom, it's time. There was a long silence. Then, when did you get so strong, Marcus? So certain? When I realized that sometimes love means being the bad guy. Sometimes it means doing the hard thing, even when it hurts. We'll sign the papers tomorrow? Yes. Sarah will meet you at the house at 10 a.m. Don't be late. As I hung up, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. This was just the beginning. The real work would come in the days and weeks ahead. But for the first time in years, there was hope. Hope that my father would face his addiction. Hope that my mother would stop enabling destructive behaviors. Hope that Amanda would finally become self-sufficient. And hope that someday, they would understand that everything I did out of love. The next morning, I watched through my office window as my family arrived at the house to sign the papers. They looked different somehow, smaller, but also more real. The facades were cracking, the pretenses falling away. It was time to rebuild, not just the finances, but the trust, the honesty, the genuine connections that had been buried under years of secrets and denial. My jaw tightened. What happened? Your mother reported it immediately, as per our agreement. She chose the lease conditions over enabling your sister. That's significant progress, Mr. Turner. It was progress. Expensive, painful progress bought with destroyed relationships and endless sleepless nights. But progress nonetheless. After signing the lease agreement, my parents had stuck to their end of the bargain with a dedication that surprised me. Dad attended both financial counseling and GA meetings. Mom joined a support group for family members of gambling addicts. They submitted to weekly credit checks and monthly budget reviews without complaint. Amanda, as expected, hadn't taken her forced independence well. She'd moved in with a friend, claiming I'd ruined her life. The last I heard, she was working as a retail manager, her first real job in years. I maintained my distance, monitoring their progress through Dr. Mitchell and Sarah. It wasn't that I didn't want to see them. I just knew that too much contact too soon could disrupt their recovery. Then came the call that changed everything. It was a Tuesday evening, just like that fateful night 6 months ago. But this time, when my phone rang displaying Dad, my heart didn't fill with dread. Son, his voice was different, clearer, steadier. Can we talk? 20 minutes later, I sat across from my parents at their favorite diner, Neutral Territory. Dad looked healthier, the haunted look in his eyes replaced by something calmer. Mom's hands didn't shake as she stirred her coffee. 182 days clean, Dad said without preamble. No gambling, no secret debts. Your mother's been keeping count. I know, I replied softly. Dr. Mitchell keeps me updated. Marcus, Mom leaned forward, we've been doing a lot of work in our counseling sessions. About patterns, enabling behaviors, and accountability. Dad cleared his throat. I owe you an apology, son. Not just for what I said that night, but for years of not being the father you deserved. I felt something tight in my chest begin to loosen. Dad, let me finish, he held up his hand. You tried to help us, tried to show us we were heading for disaster. Instead of listening, I let my pride nearly destroy this family. Called you a disappointment when the truth is, I was disappointed in myself. Mom wiped a tear from her cheek. We've been going through our bank statements from the past 5 years. Really looking at them. The amount of money we wasted, the opportunities we squandered, and all while you were trying to save us from ourselves. I didn't do it to punish you, I said carefully. The house, the conditions, it was the only way I could think of to force real change. We know that now, Dad nodded. Dr. Mitchell helped us see it. You didn't take our home away, you saved it. Saved us. The waitress arrived with our orders, 3 slices of apple pie, just like we used to share on Sunday afternoons years ago. There's something else, Mom said, pulling an envelope from her purse. We've been saving part of what would have gone to gambling and credit card payments. It's not much, but, she slid the envelope across the table. Inside was a check for $15,000. Mom, no. That's your emergency fund. It's the first repayment, Dad interrupted. For the original $90,000 you paid off. We know it's just a fraction, but it's a start. We want to make this right. I stared at the check, feeling tears prick at my eyes. It wasn't about the money, it never had been. It was about them finally understanding, finally taking responsibility. Keep it, I said, sliding the envelope back. Put it toward your future. That's all I ever wanted. Marcus, Mom's voice cracked, we miss you. Miss having you in our lives. Could we start over? Before I could respond, the diner's door chimed. Amanda walked in, stopping short when she saw us. For a moment, nobody moved. Then, to my surprise, Mom spoke up. Amanda, we were just discussing family accountability. Would you like to join us? Amanda's face went through a range of emotions before settling into resignation. Yeah, she said quietly, pulling up a chair. Maybe it's time I did. Over the next hour, we talked. Really talked, without the old defenses and denials. Amanda admitted she'd been wrong to depend on our parents for so long. Dad spoke about his gambling addiction with raw honesty. Mom acknowledged her role in enabling both of them. And I finally told them how much it hurt to watch them self-destruct, how desperate I'd been to find a way to help that they couldn't reject. 2 weeks later, I arrived at the house, their house, my house, our house, for Sunday dinner. The first of what would become a new tradition. The living room had been transformed into a budget planning station, with spreadsheets and financial goals posted on the walls alongside family photos. Dad proudly showed me his 1-year GA plan. Mom had started teaching basic budgeting classes at the community center, turning her hard-learned lessons into help for others. Even Amanda had signed up for financial literacy courses at the local college. As we sat down to eat, Dad raised his glass of water. To second chances, he said. And to the son who loved us enough to be the bad guy. Mom reached for my hand. Are we still a disappointment? I squeezed her fingers, remembering that awful night 6 months ago. No, I said truthfully. You're a miracle in progress. 1 year later, I transferred ownership of the house back to my parents. Not as a gift, but through a carefully structured purchase agreement they'd developed with their financial counselor. They'd insisted on buying it back, part of their commitment to maintaining their newfound financial responsibility. Amanda had moved into her own apartment, started a small online business, and was managing it responsibly. She'd even started dating someone new, an accountant, of all people. The day we signed the transfer papers, Dad pulled me aside. In his hand was his 1-year GA chip. I want you to have this, he said, pressing it into my palm. Because without you, I wouldn't have earned it. I looked at the chip, then at my father, my proud, stubborn father who had finally learned to accept help, to admit weakness, to embrace change. Keep it, I said, closing his fingers back around it. But promise me something? Anything, son. Promise me you'll remember that sometimes love looks like an auction paddle. Sometimes it looks like a hard truth. And sometimes, he finished, pulling me into a hug, it looks like a son who refuses to give up on his family. As we joined Mom and Amanda in the kitchen, I looked around at my family, scarred but healing, damaged but rebuilding, finally facing reality together. They weren't perfect. Neither was I. But we were learning that real love isn't about enabling or avoiding conflict. Sometimes, real love means being strong enough to be the villain in someone's story, until they're ready to write a better ending for themselves.